Alright, now for your Overworld lucky dice. Forewarning, you have to have beaten the game to finish the Overworld. The last 3 dice require finishing it. However, there are plenty of dice throughout that you can get as you go, but most are locked behind areas that you will have to double back to, several different ways.
Perfection itself! Quickly now, bring that lead here.
Whether doubling back is making bridges, or shooting across geysers, or breaking down gates, it will take time to get all of the Overworld dice.
The more the dice, the better.
And each individual dice makes so little difference to your loot luck on their own that honestly it's not that big of a deal to go through and grab them all until you have access to every single dice.
Golden, baby!
These bridges that you see me crossing are not available until after Wargtooth Shallows, for example.
Getting lucky.
However, the Overworld has a really cool map. I genuinely really love this feature. How instead of just fast traveling from place to place, there is this other place you can explore. As well as all the extra dungeons and the shrines and the random attacks, even though they can be kind of obnoxious here and there.
Golden, baby!
The cool little side quests that you get to do as you're in the Overworld, they don't take a lot of time. They just lead into a dungeon here, a dungeon there. Cool little storylines.
You're feeling lucky.
Although the Overworld is very saturated with dice. There are 22 dice in the Overworld alone. So it does make quite a jump getting all of them.
Numbers, go!
After beating Karnok's Wall is another time when you unlock the option to double back and get several dice that you've had to pass up to this point, including this cool one that you get to drop down off of this cliff edge to. The main point of doubling back after Karnok's Wall, however, is that now you can use these rune switches to open the arcane gate-looking things.
Oh, that's one lucky die.
And trust me, there are several of them, as well as other things that are locked behind them, like I think one of them has a dungeon or something, or maybe it's a shrine piece, I don't recall. Thankfully, the Overworld map is not super large, so it does not take a lot of time to run back and forth from the dice, especially if you get the shrine buff for movement speed.
Golden, baby!
This dice here is even all the way back at the very beginning of the game in the Overworld. If by this point you haven't, I highly recommend grabbing as many shrine pieces as you can, just because some of their buffs are really, really good.
You're feeling lucky.
One good thing about the Overworld is none of the dice are hidden, quote unquote. This is probably the easiest dice to miss, and it's just because you have to come up to the back of the soda can.
The more the dice, the better the loot.
And then just like everywhere else, you have dice that are wrapped around tight little edges and such on cliff faces, places that are kind of out of the way. But if you're like me and you want to explore all of the map, then they're easy to find.
Getting lucky.
I think these dice that are locked past dungeons were probably the hardest ones to get, just because it took longer time-wise after you could do them to actually go through the process of accessing them.
Ooh.
However, some dice, even in the last areas of the Overworld, bring you right back to your basics from how you got your first dice, with punching trees.
Oh, that's one lucky die.
Now, your final 3 dice in the overworld are accessible after beating the game. There will be a side quest in this location, where you will be granted an upgrade to your melee ability that allows you to punch through these dark magic barriers to access some temples. And next to each of those temples is a dice. One in the desert,
Oh, that's one lucky.
one where the water used to be,
You're feeling lucky.
and finally one in the forest in that little loop around above where Mr. Mans got backstabbed at the beginning of the game, where you can access it from the bridge, from the Notion.
Lucky you.